Welcome back to part 3 of our bunk bed project. Today we're going to be talking about mortise and tenon joinery. So thank you for coming along.
Welcome back to my wood shop here in the big woods of northwest Missouri. Thank you so much for coming along as we continue our journey together into the experience of fine woodworking. Today we're going to continue our build of the bunk beds that we started here a little bit back. And let me just review, if I could. You will remember that when we started out with the whole idea of design. And you can get as detailed or as least detailed as you want to on the design. The main idea is to get what you visualize in your mind out on a piece of paper so that you can see it and think through a lot of the problems before you get into them. All right? And there's different ways of building. That's not to say that you're going to have everything down on that piece of paper. In fact, part of the creativity, part of the joy of woodworking is to be able to adapt and to improvise and to make something really beautiful out of your design and let it just sort of take the form. However, it's been my experience that if you have a lot of these things thought out first and you have in your mind's eye and you can put it on a piece of paper what you really want, you have a lot less issues and the experience is a lot more enjoyable if you do that. So that was the first part that we went through. The second part was then selecting the materials. And I mentioned to you about quarter sawn versus plain sawn wood. And you can see the ends of these boards are quarter sawn. The grain is straight. We talked a little bit about that and the importance of that. Now that helps keep the material from warping and twisting and bending and bowing and all the things that wood tends to do. This is construction lumber. And I'll say right off the bat, we've had some issues. I've had some issues with it wanting to twist and turn because it's not as dry, say as finished hardwood that I would dry down to 7 or 9%. So this has a little bit more moisture in it. It tends to want to bow a little bit more on me if I let it sit around too long. So the main thing here is to work this material and to work it pretty quickly. So let me tell you today what we're going to do. Today the idea is that we're going to finish up with these mortise and tenon joints. Generally speaking, you want to cut your mortises first, and a mortise is just a slot or a hole in a piece of material in which a tenon will fit into that. All right, so here's a little example that I did. I try to always do a test piece. There we go. And you can see that's the tenon that I cut. You'll notice here how I rounded the edge of that tenon. All right, so then when it goes in, a good mortise and tenon joint should go in and you should hear a little snap. Not taking this in and out a lot of times, but when you first do that, that should be pretty tight. And when you hold that up, you can see that should stay. That shouldn't fall out. All right? In fact, that should be tight enough that's going to hold good. You can see I've done another one over here, a smaller one here, where it's the same thing. You can hear that just a little bit. And you can hear it when it clicks back together. You can hear the click. That's when you know you've got a good joint. Again, you'll hear that click. When it goes together, should hold and make you a nice flush joint when you're done. So that's going to be what we're going to do today. Let me give you a little preview, if I could, of what we're going to be doing in the next few lessons. In the next few lessons, we're going to be taking these pieces that I've made, getting them all assembled together, getting the slats between the headboard and the footboard rails and stiles, and then cutting a railing, a long railing to join the headboard and footboard together with a through mortise, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that side of it, that little technique that we're going to be doing. So today we're going to go over to the drill press, and we're going to get started on that just here in a few minutes and get these mortise and tenon joints all prepared and ready to go for assembly. Let me mention, if I could, real quickly about the mortise and tenon joints and why we do it. Mortise and tenon joints, just a little history, is one of the oldest joints known to civilization. We have this dated back 7,000 years. In 1954, a group of archaeologists found an old ship around the Gaza area, around Egypt, and they dated those mortise and tenon joints, that wood joinery in that ship. I think it's pronounced Khufu, the Khufu ship. They dated that joinery back to about 2600 BC. So 4,000 years old, 4,500 years old. That's pretty old. In 2012, University in Germany, a group of archaeologists discovered a find in some abandoned wells that they dated back the use of mortise and tenon joinery to about 4,000 to 5,000 BC. So 7,000 years or so this joint's been around. It's been a very useful joint. We found it in China, we found it in Asia, we found them in Europe. Very useful joint. And you can understand, if you look at the joinery and the construction of it, just why that is. It's a very strong joint. When you get your mortise and tenon joint together, it has tremendous resistance to force and pressures and twisting, and it will last for years, hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years if done properly. What I'm going to do with this joint here is that the idea is to maximize your glue surfaces, so you want to get it as big as possible. You need to leave at least 1/4 inch shoulder on your mortises here, so those tenons will pop in good and have resistance to movement. But I'm also going to put some dowel pins in here, 2 or 3, and just drill and put those in here. I'm doing that for strength, for the function of the joint, but also for some aesthetic aspects too. It's going to look pretty sharp with 2 to 3 dowel pins in here, especially when I get this finished and stained and get that portion of it done. So that's where we're at and what we're doing today. So good again to have you along with us. We're going to go over to the drill press here in just a moment and make some chips. So we'll see you in a bit.
Okay, you can see now I've got the drill press going. I've got a 3/4 Forstner bit in the drill press, and I'm just nibbling out each one of those mortises. You'll notice as I'm coming in, I'm not going down all the way. I'm trying to just do it in just little bites. A couple reasons for that. Number one, you get a cleaner cut, and you're not going to bind on the side of that mortise as you're going down in there. Another reason is safety. Whenever you try to take too big a bite, you could get that bit bound in that mortise so that you could have a unsafe twisting direction, and you don't want that. Notice I've got it tight up against that fence, and I'm coming down, getting it all lined up. I've got the ends marked. Shortly before this, I took this over to the router table and had my 3/4 bit, had it raised up about 1/4 inch or so, and just marked where that mortise was going to go. So now I'm just taking my drill press and just hogging it out. What I'll do is once I get all this hogged out and I get it cleaned out, then I'll take a good sharp chisel and just clean up the insides of those and make that look nice. You'll also notice I've got some green tape. That's a sight marker. I actually have the depth set on my drill press. That just gives me a nice visual so I can see what's going on. Alright, and it's coming along real good. You can see how I'm just nibbling it out ever so slightly there. And let that drill press come to a stop. Take a look at that. There we go, and we'll be ready to cut our tenons after this. Alright, the next part of the operation now is to start cutting these tenons. So this is going to be the bottom rail of the bunk bed, the head rail and the foot, and the footboard and the headboard. You'll notice I'm getting everything lined up. I've got my crosscut sled all laid out. I've got my stop marked so I just get the right length for that tenon. And notice I'm just sneaking up on it there, so I'll make sure I get a good cut. You'll also notice here that I'm going to roll this around, get each of the cheeks cut, each of the little sides cut here. There we go. And then once I get this side done here and all 4 of these cut, and you see how I'm just rolling that around, sliding, making sure it's tight up against that little stop I've got. Also notice I've got my dust collection out to the side, so I'm getting very little dust created here. I love using this crosscut sled. I've mentioned this before, but I get very accurate cuts, just almost perfectly square. Definitely within tolerance. More than really I can even tell by sight. And it gives me a nice square fit for the sides of this mortise when it fits in, or this tenon when it fits into the mortise. So you want a couple things. You want to make sure you got a lot of glue surface, which I'll have. Then you want to make sure that the sides are going to fit tight up against the mortise, so that you don't get any movement, any rocking. It's just going to give you a nice tight fit. So you can see I'm getting all 4 of those cut on that end. Slow process. Turn off my saw here, and I want to check my square, and then we'll go cut those tenons. Okay, so you see I've got all my tenons marked. Now I'm using a Tenon Jig. I made this a few years ago, and that little Tenon Jig has just been a very nice little feature. If I've got to do a lot of tenons, this is the way to go. It gives you a nice clean side for those cheeks, and when you cut those, just is so slick and nice and clean. And it's very accurate. I've got that so it just slides right over my fence. You can see that of my table saw. I've got it laid out so it's going to cut just to the bottom edge of that crosscut I made, the crosscut sled. And see, I left a nice little piece there. And I'm just going to rotate that around. I'm going to do each of the sides first. That's the idea, each of the long sides, and then I'll do the ends by just adjusting this all over a bit. You'll get to see that here just in a moment. But each one of those just step by step. And there it goes again. And see, I'm just taking my time, working through it, and taking that piece off. So when I'm done, I'll have each of these all cut. They'll be all cut to the exact width, so they'll just fit in that mortise pretty well. Just snug. You don't want it too tight, you don't want it too loose. The reason you got that mortise first is because you always want to fit your tenon to it. A lot easier to take the material off the tenon than it is to adjust the mortise. So there it is. It's looking real good. We'll move to the ends just in a moment. Got the sides all cut, the long sides all cut for my tenons. And now I'm going to lay it out so I can cut the end pieces there. I just want to take off just a little bit to square this up. Again, I want an even shoulder all the way around. It's going to be about 1/4 of an inch all the way around on this. See, I'm just laying that out there with my square. Getting a good cut, and that's for a good visual. And you can see how that's gonna cut. I've adjusted over my Tenon Jig. I actually just bumped over my fence. Let that Tenon Jig right where it was. Got it all lined out. Tried a little scrap piece, make sure it worked. I'm seating it down good. Putting my clamp on it. And getting ready to do that cut. It's a good idea to put a clamp on it so nothing gets away on you. Alright. You'll also notice here, just safety wise, notice where I've got the position of my hand. Keep that hand well out of the way, even though this is a saw with a stop blade feature on it. I still like to keep just safety. Keep my hand away from that blade. I don't want to test it. I want to make sure that I've got my hand out of the way and using good safety procedures when I do this. This makes a very nice tenon. It's square, it's neat, it's clean. It's a way to go again if you're cutting a lot of tenons, and this is a larger tenon too. If I'm just doing a few, then I can use my crosscut sled and nibble it off. But if I've got to do a lot, by far this is a nice way to go. And a Tenon Jig is not hard to make. It's a very easy thing to make. These days I'll do a little video on this and show you just how easy it is. Checking it one more time. There we go. I'm going to show you another alternate way of cutting tenons too here in just a moment, but this is how you do it on a table saw. There we go. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these little cheeks here off of this tenon. Now there's several ways to do this. One is with the table saw. Another way is with a really good quality back saw. So I'm going to show you how we lay it out. Basically what I'm going to do is just come here and get my pencil laid out. Make me line up. Come over here to the opposite side. And all that does is give me just a nice cheek to go by, a nice line to go by to cut these little cheeks. Your layout is very important when you do something like this, so that you have a nice, good, crisp line to saw to. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to cut this just to show you that you don't have to have fancy hand tools or really machine tools or hand tools to be able to do some fine woodworking. Like the old masters had pretty limited tools in what they did, and they created some beautiful work. So let me just show you. I'm just going to line up right there, and the idea is to leave my pencil line when we're done. Here we go. I'm going to use my thumb here as a guide. Try to keep my shoulders flat. And just right in line here with my arm. My shoulder, my elbow, and the same piece of plane. Come down here. When you get to the end, just go really slowly, light cut. This is a good quality saw, so it cuts it really nicely. And there we go. Left a little bit of a line on top and on both sides, and that's a pretty square cut. That's not too bad, actually. That's a pretty square cut. Yeah, it's just right at it. Okay, well that's how we cut the little cheeks off there with a handsaw. Thanks again for coming along with me. Until we meet again, happy chips.